We're live now.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of VCTV, the Venture Capital TV from La Token. I'm Sunny Mohanty, the Regional Director of La Token here in Singapore. So we have a very interesting session today on the beginning of the week on a Monday. Apparently, we have one speaker from Middle East who is very much keen to speak about her experience and insights touching upon the world. Hi, Helen. So we have Helen Tang from Dubai, Middle East, like Dubai, I guess. so today is going to be Helen. Welcome to my show again. I mean, we've spoken last week, I guess. Welcome to show. This is a very special show today because we just have you and me.
Okay, that's fine. That works for me as well.
Yeah. So it's going to be like I wish we had a fireside. It could be a fireside chat.
Yes, yeah.
So we have 1 hour session. Let's make it interactive between you and me. So because you are into a right profession to be able to answer what's going on around the world. And so here we go. So let's start with our introduction. Take your time with your introduction, what you've done over the years, and we go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. So Sonny, it's so great to see you again. And some of you may have heard me last week, some may not. So my name's Helen and I'm from Australia. I've been brought up in Australia, studied in Hong Kong and then in the UK, qualified as a lawyer, a barrister. So I tend to deal with disputes. However, some point in my life, I did actually think and rethink about what to do with my life. And I ended up spending some time working with startups. So I spent a 3-month stint at NASA, actually, with Singularity University, looking at emerging technologies, looking at how to help startups. And so I actually, from there, ended up being funded by the Swiss government to go to Bosnia-Herzegovina to train entrepreneurs, to teach them how to pitch, how to engage with startups and also investors. And I had the opportunity to also go to Japan, where I actually was funded by the European Commission and also by the Japan Ministry of Economics. What was interesting there was this million-dollar question: how do you double the space sector in Japan? So I worked at a very, you could say, high level, but at the same time I was very interested in startups on the ground. What were the challenges, what were the opportunities? And that led me to coming to the Middle East, where my first role was actually as a project manager looking into reinsurance on rocket launches and satellites. And at the same time, what was interesting was, there's the booming sector of the space sector. This is well before COVID-19. So I actually helped out in the space legislation as well, looking at space debris, space orbit reinsurance. And then I reverted back to my ordinary role of helping businesses, startups, doing business in the Middle East. So to give you a background, so I'm qualified as a barrister in the UK, so England and Wales. And I'm also qualified here in Dubai, what they call a law consultant, because as you may know, only local lawyers can represent clients in court, but I'm registered as what you call a DIFC, Dubai International Financial Center advocate. So I basically can represent clients in court and deal with all the DIFC matters. So you've got the onshore, which is the UAE law, and then you've got the offshore, which is DIFC. So that's sort of me in a nutshell right now. And in my firm at Hamdan Al-Shamsi, we deal with sort of full service, from your very simple contracts to banking, construction, civil to criminal, as we call it. And startups is an area that we're very interested in. In fact, for the next 2 weeks, we are actually holding 1 hour seminars at the Youth Hub, which is organized under the auspices of the Prime Minister's office here in Dubai. So when you have a chance to come to Dubai, I welcome you to visit Emirates Tower, where it's very exciting there. There's a lot of, I remember when I first went there, and I saw the Department of Possibilities. I just thought, this is not your usual government office, but it's very inspiring. And is this a good time for me to also talk about a little bit about Dubai, the Middle East as a market?
Of course.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, as most of you know, so UAE is a pretty young country, let's say, 30, 40 years ago when they discovered oil. And from there, you will hear stories of people from taxi drivers to, the more elder senior people would say, I came here and there was nothing, or there were 5 buildings. Now, if you come along Sheikh Zayed Road, it's full of construction. It's got the world, as you may know, 7-star hotels, the world's tallest building. And in fact, they're building the next biggest shopping mall I was going to say the universe, but actually shopping mall in the Middle East. And And so that gives you a context of how ambitious this young country is. And so I came here because of space, but at the same time, it's a thriving, business environment. So I can speak quite comfortably about the DIFC for those that may be interested. So the Dubai International Financial Center was set up to actually encourage foreign businesses to come and basically set up offices. So I guess in terms of our current audience would primarily be startups or investors who are interested in the market. Now, what's been quite interesting, so I've been sort of visiting the DIFC quite regularly to meet clients. And one of the recent developments is they have what they call a Fintech hive. So for all you guys who are into Fintech, I would highly recommend to visit it because it is plush new offices. They've literally done a whole extension during COVID-19 to expand the offices and to grow it. So, while some people might be at home doing exercises, the DIFC has actually been very proactive to make the most of their time. So what you will find there is you'll find it's like any accelerator, very nice office with a view of encouraging startups to come and settle in, I guess, the DIFC Tech Hub. And there, you could say, for them, like all accelerators, they are there not just because of the location, but potentially for the networks that they have in the Middle East. So, for example, when I was traveling, be it in Hong Kong, Ukraine, America, and I speak to people about the Middle East, they're very intrigued. They're like, so you speak Arabic? So my answer is no, I don't. And then secondly is, well, you're a woman. And I'm like, yes, I am. But it doesn't stop you from doing business either. And then the third thing is, well, how is it actually doing business here? Because, I've spoken to investors, I've been there 1 year, I've waited 1 year, and nothing's happened. So the default position is a lot of entrepreneurs would actually go to Americas because they say it's faster, easier. But actually, I'm sure most of the investors here are also very serious. There are a lot of families or family offices, as it were, which is somewhat unique compared to maybe what I would call other jurisdictional countries. And there's a lot of high net worth individuals. It's not to say other countries don't. Obviously, Singapore has plenty. But in terms of investments, it's a huge thing. And I know just before us doing this live, we were talking, about how for a lot of them, they do want to invest. The question is, they may not know exactly what a startup is about. Right. So it's no different, by the way, like any other investor, right? So they will look at obviously your pitch deck, they will look at your team, they will look at your product, your service, and they just need to understand that you've got something viable for them to sort of invest in. And so, for so many of the wealthy clients that I've or the businesses, that I've spoken to, they do traditional investments. So they do what I would say run-of-the-mill, banking, or they would have, properties or, assets that you and I would identify as normal and recognizable. So when you suddenly jump into, like, say, fintech or blockchain or whatnot, they get very excited and curious, but then they will pull back because they're quite conservative and they say, well, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know. So there is an element of education that's needed on both ends, from the startup side, and I think also from the business and the regulatory side. So to give you an idea, it's only about literally 2 weeks ago that there was a securities token offering that was launched. It's one of the biggest in Dubai in the Middle East. So that is how new it is. And in terms of regulation, I would say it's still relatively slower, because I mentioned to you a moment ago, for example, in terms of bankruptcy laws, in terms of data protection laws, new laws were released. So bankruptcy laws released 1 year ago, data protection laws about a year ago. So we are in the Middle East, or at least in the UAE, a few years behind other countries or European jurisdictions. But the good thing about that is that it means that if you come first, then you're a first mover. So there are benefits to that as well, because you can actually shape, the law and policy that comes with whatever product you're trying to launch. So that's sort of like the Middle East in a nutshell, with Dubai as a main focus. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Thank you, Helen. I think you touched upon many things to start with, which is a good thing. I want to start with, what's the status of COVID-19 in Dubai?
Oh, okay.
What's happening? Because you just mentioned that startups now move to this office, which has been supported by the DIFC for networking purposes. Yes. So is it like operational now? And
yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to know more. What's
Yeah.
the
So actually, so Dubai is quite a what I call a transitional place. So if you were to look at the flights, and previously when I was studying, living in Australia, studying in the UK, I would travel via, Dubai quite often. So Dubai is one of those places where, like Emirates is one of the biggest airlines. So you get people from all nationalities, all backgrounds, coming via Dubai. And I guess the up and down of it is I've actually met people who were coming to Dubai especially because of COVID-19, because they thought, well, the weather is so hot, it may well kill off the virus by summer. And you had people who were actually stuck in Dubai who then thought, well, why don't I try and look for a job in Dubai? So I think because of the situation in COVID, it's very unusual, let's put it this way. But you do have, so at the beginning, we did have the lockdown 2 weeks at a time, which I thought was very smart of the government, because in other jurisdictions like Melbourne, where they go, right, we're going to lock everyone down for 6 weeks, it does create a sense of uncertainty in a way that people would feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I think the government handled the situation very well. I think they are very vigorous in their testing. So in another state like Abu Dhabi, they've been far more stricter. So every time you come in and out, you actually have to be tested. Dubai has not been like that, but for example, now if people want to fly, they need permission. So you need like a certificate or something to fly out and fly back in. And I think that's just a way to, I guess responsible governance, right? To make sure that, people are tracked and traced in a way that maybe in the past people wouldn't be so open to it. So I think we're managing very well. I mean, everyone has to wear masks, gloves, but in the office it's business as usual. And in fact, we've been sort of back full service in the office. Of course, those that want to or wish to work from home, they can do that as well. So it's, to a certain extent, it's much freer. And I think because the figures have been relatively low, so I think we've been feeling a lot more comforted by it. Touch wood, there's no second or third wave coming. But so far, I think it feels okay. How about Singapore? How's that going there?
Oh yeah, great. I mean, good to know about Dubai. Yeah, Singapore is doing fine as well. Like as you said, Dubai, like Singapore just completed, 55 years of independence. Like we had the National Day yesterday.
Oh, great! Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I mean, we are doing fine. We don't have any waves, second waves as well. Like economy opened up in phases, and we have this app. It's called Trace Me app that is a mandatory thing to have on your phone, and everywhere you go you have to scan, get into a safe zone, get your temperature checked, in and out everywhere. So you have safe zones and you have to follow it as a religiously. So we have been traced and tracked everywhere you go, so that the numbers remain contained. So that's the beauty about smart cities like Singapore and Dubai, to be honest, because of the technology. So it's so easy to monitor, it's easy to keep this contained. But see other countries like bigger countries, like when you hit Europe or US, I mean, things are blowing out of proportion. And good thing about I think Singapore and Dubai, I think people do follow the laws, right? So we do wear the mask when we're out. We do wear the mask. We do follow the social distancing measures. If there are only 5 people allowed to sit in a restaurant, we do follow that very strictly. And mask is a must. So that has obviously helped to contain the virus in a big way in Singapore. So I think this is the safest place. Obviously, Dubai, obviously for you is home. For me, Singapore is home. So I find it very safe to be here, to moving around, to go for like a jog. I feel very mentally relieved when I'm inside here. So yeah, it's the same thing. And the startup community, in Singapore is also like, quite buzzing before the COVID-19, but it's still there. I mean, obviously, the momentum has gone down a bit because of less travel, no conferences, because obviously this was the hub. I think Dubai and Singapore are the 2 big cities, I would say cities, who held many global conferences over the years. So I think if Singapore was my first home, Dubai was my second home. Till last year, I used to be in Dubai for like almost every month. I used to be there for events. So I think these countries have a lot of similarities in terms of governance, laws and regulations. People are law abiding. People are serious about investments, be it startups or investors. all the serious things get done. I can say because I live here, and obviously you're from Dubai. So let's talk about the startup community, how resilient they are. So let's start in Dubai, then we can move slowly, because you also have experience working in Japan and Australia, maybe USA as well. So how resilient the startups are? What kind of pivots have you seen during this time?
Yeah. Well, I think this question is very timely because it's also in context of COVID-19. So I think if I take it a step back and before we go to startups, talk about law firms, I think for a lot of law firms traditionally, they would win clients and, by meeting the client and all this kind of stuff. And for those that are resistant, I would say that business wouldn't be doing so good. And so for those that are more tech savvy or can catch up on tech, I think they're in a much better position. I think that's the same with startups. I think the interesting thing about, COVID-19 is quite quickly we've all had to learn the hard way and to manage our time better. So for example, some people would feel that they're working 24/7 being at home, while some people can have clear distinctions and say, I wake up at this time, I go home and, call it a day. I think actually COVID-19 for me, if I look at the silver lining, I would say it's actually brought the future here. What I mean by that is I'm quite a strong advocate of using technology in, say, the legal realm. But because of COVID-19, I feel like everything we thought about in the future has just fast forwarded. So for example, where in the past you say, I need to meet my mum, my sister and everything. So now, I think businesses that do VR headsets, that are able to give a sort of 360-degree feel when they talk to their family and friends are doing far better. So we talk about, like businesses like food deliveries, they've gone up by 200%. We talk about Netflix entertainment that's gone off the roof, The interesting thing, glove supply and also sanitation and, mask that has also gone out of hand. I remember there's one startup that I know of who actually was doing masks in China at the time, but he stopped production 3 months before COVID-19 started. So I said, look, you could have been a billionaire in 6 months, but anyway, that's a different story. So I think to ride out the wave of COVID-19, not knowing when is there an end date, but let's be resilient, like I'll use the word that you use, is that we need to plan a bit long term. So let's say we give it another, half year to 1 year. But then by that stage, the way we work would have also changed, So there's a lot of, I took part in an organizational challenge. Actually, it's called the EXO Challenge, EXO Alliance. You can have a look at them. And it's talking about transformational organizations. And I think COVID-19 poses a challenge, because startups are still organizations. It's just maybe a smaller, CEO, CTO, and a few other people. But it's how you adapt and change to survive and thrive, right? So it's important that we look at not just surviving, but how do we, really thrive? And I think, for example, people who negotiate. So I've heard people who negotiate phone bills, rentals, you name it, being on a shoestring because things are just not coming and going, right? So I think actually COVID-19 is a really good time for people to sit, meditate, and really think strategically, okay, with limited time and resources, how can I really, it's like planting seeds. I use that analogy because right now it's not about the sale in the same way. I mean, sure, you can go online, you can try and sell what you can, but there's a problem of shipping. There's a problem of supply chain, right? So then you go, okay, well, what if I start planting ideas? What if I start doing a marketing strategy? So I think there is still possible growth, but the focus would be different. Like, so people thinking about recruitment, retention. And I think one of the interesting things is, countries saying, okay, well, I can't recruit. Okay, so one of two things here. I can't recruit internationally because there's no flights. I will look internally. So then there's a lot more focus of, looking for talent. Like I know Singapore is one of those countries, right? Or you could say, well, I can recruit internationally, but then it's a given that they're going to work remotely. So you see how the notion of flexibility is really stretched, but the beauty of it means then you really have no borders, right? Where in the past you say, okay, you have to come and travel, you have to meet my clients and customers. Then you have to think creatively, well, okay, let's say I'm a startup, okay, I can physically come to Singapore or physically come to Dubai, or I just hire someone that I've met once or twice online like this, and then let's just do it. Let's just try it and give it a go, right? So I think the whole notion of trust, which then comes back to this notion of blockchain, is really tested, right? Because what you're trying to do is, in essence, you're trying to get people to learn, to trust, to see whether they can do business deals, be it not, you know, physically sending over a shipment, because it may well be delayed for a few months now. But this idea of, well, can we still do transactions, still do business online without, you know, without the physical, you know, because a lot of businesses still here, even in Dubai, they prefer face-to-face, right? So they would say, okay, well, let me meet you first, Helen, before we sign this. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You just want to check that I'm 3D. That's no problem.
Right.
You know, not just a robot behind a screen, that I actually am, you know, someone you can see. That's not a problem. So we could still do that. But I think in situations where there's a limited constraint, where, you know, it's very, you know, like when you look at Angel List and you look at all these possibilities, I think for me, I meet far more people online, say on LinkedIn, than I do face to face, which is, I think, a phenomenon that will be increasingly more so. And this idea of us being increasingly more comfortable, right? So it may well be, you know, first degree, second degree referral, but I think this idea of doing business will eventually change. And what you're doing right now, you know, at the token is the right thing. You're trying to gain trust. You're trying to engage with your target audience, you know, in a way that they're going to be so familiar with you and who you are and what you're presenting, that there's no question that they will come to you if they've got no questions about security tokens, right? So yeah.
On that point, Helen, you rightly pointed out, the thing is, when somebody asked me, like, how could you pull off doing the shows like Monday to Friday?
Yeah.
I said, hey, I am quite passionate about talking to people. I really, you know, the thing is, the whole point of me traveling around the world and attending these conferences was just meeting people, networking, and that obviously has stopped because no travels, right? No conferences.
Yeah.
So we pivoted, like La Token pivoted quite early on this year in February, just, you know, just about the right time when COVID-19 happened.
Yeah.
We pivoted like in February. And when I saw the concept, I was like wowed with the concept. But not many people could think through this, like how you're going to have everybody on a VCTV and, you know, still do networking. A lot of events, online events happened. They came and they went. But the thing is, see, it's not about. I have to be very realistic and very honest. The format of this is, even though it's like a daily show, we have few people on the show. It's a very personal kind of involvement and discussion that we have with the investor base, be the investor base of the startup. And this has gelled very well. Like I already have a relationship with you. I've spoken to you before. I've spoken to you for the second time, and I'm sure I'm going to speak to you again. So this has obviously helped to build a trust, and it goes with other people I speak to as well. And you're very rightly pointed out, this is going to the way we are doing business, or we were doing business before COVID-19, will definitely change, because we are saving you know, the costs on you know, hosting huge conferences. That comes with a lot of cost, traveling, accommodation. You know how what kind of expenses goes into it. But if you are able to build that trust over time, if you're able to close deals online, I mean, why would a company think of bringing all these people together into a physical event, big sized, if they could just do this over online? What's the trust factor? And blockchain technology, as rightly said, has, I think what I have seen is it's not a couple of months, but a couple of days, from days to weeks. A lot of crypto hedge funds have just come up. The family offices, they've just contacted me. They're looking for startups in the space of blockchain, in the space of crypto to invest in. So this has shot up. Bitcoin, you know, and the adoption, the rate, the way, you know, blockchain as a technology was always there. It was the good boy, like I would say the good child, but it was a crypto was not the nice child. People were like, oh, probably it's a scam. Crypto is a scam. But now you see people, now they understand what is cryptocurrency. This is a legitimate currency, I mean, on the blockchain technology. So people are starting to educate themselves. People are starting to work on it. So it has built the trust over the time. And the technology obviously has helped a lot as well. So from my perspective, good times.
Yeah. I was going to say, actually, on your point about a pivot, I think that is the key word to survive and thrive during COVID-19. So to give you an example, for me, actually, and also for our clients, it doesn't actually really matter whether you're a one-man show or you're a multi-million business. Everyone is going through change. And it's interesting how some companies are dealing with it. So you have situations where some people are either laid off or pushed off, whatever ladder they were on. And then they have to reinvent themselves. Even organizations need to reinvent themselves. And as simple as, so I have a good friend who used to be a head chef of a certain quite top restaurant, and now they have to all go do takeaway. How can you give that experience in a takeaway form? It's like you still want to run, and maybe the price point might need to differ, but it's interesting because you still want to keep your customers and give them the same experience, but in a different way. And so, what's interesting is seeing how receptive people are to that as well. So, of course, it's not the same. You go to a nice posh restaurant, you give plastic forks and spoons. It's not the same as the metal one, right? You would rather go home and eat, right? But I think it's simple things like that, and in which this is a great testing ground to try it, right? Like you say, TikTok is another one I do not understand. I downloaded it. I tried to understand it. I know it's a booming business. I know if I was an investor, I would invest. But my problem is I don't really get it. And maybe it's telling my age, but the pure millennials who are having so much fun. And I think it's actually not the fact that it's the form of video. It's more that it's entertainment. If you're stuck at home, you have so many hours of gardening, cooking, reading you can do. You want to do other things, right? And of course you can watch Netflix, but then if you actually engage, it's a bit of fun, a bit of laughter, a bit of easing the stress, as it were, then you've got a business, so to speak. So ironically, people who are actually looking at gaming, looking at entertainment would do very well. I mean, how many people have subscribed over Netflix? I don't know. Everyone probably has, except for me. So I think it's quite interesting how, I think it's a bit of a trial error. I go back to the court system, initially when they, whole lockdown thing, the courts were not open. And then I think they decided, okay, fine, we're going to upload everything online and we'll have hearings on Zoom, say. And then because all the lawyers went online at the same time, it crashed. And so then they had to get everyone to come back in one by one. Now, my point to tell you this story, why I'm saying it's fascinating, is because it means that there is a demand for technology in a way that wasn't before. For future conferences, you can imagine now that they have to have the capability to run it not just for 30 people, 300, but 3,000, 30,000 people, right? So where in the past where conference organizers might say, well, it's a waste of money. Now it's like, okay, how do we invest this? How do we invest our time and money? Because you can still charge for tickets. You can still charge for, so to speak, an experience, depending on people, whether they want to fly or not. But these are really serious questions because, for the whole year, I've noticed a lot of conferences being postponed or cancelled. So next year is going to be a very busy year. And so for them, whether they're going to survive or not, it's a question of whether they've got the know-how to pull it off, because it also takes a lot of effort. I'm sure you know more than me on this.
Yeah, you're right. The thing is, it's a very good question and it's a very tricky one as well because we don't know the answer. So unless and until we have a vaccination for getting rid of this virus or just at least under control, we don't know the future of events. We don't know the future of conferences. Is it going to be that large scale, that mass scale with no so many people? You can't be having masked people moving around in conferences.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to. You understand what I mean? It's not that just sitting anywhere chatting and having a mass load of people. I mean, if you think logistics, getting everybody temperature scanned, it's going to be a task in itself, right? It's very difficult to think of that because I have attended huge conferences and I can just visualize so difficult. So I don't know what's the future hold, but we have to pivot. Like our startups, people have to be ready for the worst. I mean, I think we already seen the worst now, so we don't know the future. So I think we all have to be prepared for the worst. On that note, I would like to ask you a question about other markets. Like, we touched upon Dubai, the startup hub in Dubai. So what about Japan? So what's the adoption? What's the startup community like in Japan?
Yeah. So Yeah, so I think Japan is a very interesting market. So I've had the honor, as it were, to live in Japan for about 6 months, where I studied the startup scene very intensely in different cities, actually. So Tokyo has their own environment. There's a place called Nihonbashi, which is a very thriving traditional. It's got the famous, I think, traditional bridge. You will see that I think Japan, in a nutshell, is a combination of contradiction, but in a good way. So it's got the best of tradition and it's got the best of technology. Like the UAE, it has a lot of conventions, on AI, in terms of expos and that.
Yeah.
I think we're famous for the car shows, and all that. Kyoto for me is a very interesting place because it prides itself as being one of the oldest setup and businesses. So you can go there and you can find maybe a business that was running for thousands of years, let's say. And at the same time, they're still selling kimonos, it's the same name, same brand. So for a young startup, let's say over a few years going there, if one is able to succeed in making business with them, it is like, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, going to the Queen of England and saying, hey, I want a slot somewhere in Buckingham Palace. Like it shows that you've got the clout to pull something off like that. And Kyoto as a city is amazing because it's a lively student environment. It's got the tradition, and so outside of Tokyo, it is the second biggest, I would say, tourist attraction for the samurai castles and all that. But for startups, I think it is a very intriguing place for me. So that's a place where I would say for those businesses that have something unique, combining it with history, I would say it's a good place to go. Another place I would highly recommend is Fukuoka because of the geography. So I'll talk about Tokyo last. I think that's the best way. So if you look at the map of Japan, you have Tokyo, and then at the very end, you've got a place called Hakata, Fukuoka. And that is, for me, one of the ideal geographical locations in the Northeast Asian regions because it's 2 hours from Busan, I think a few hours from Hong Kong, 3 hours, and probably Singapore. But you will see in this realm, you are, back then I would say 2 hours flight. Now I'm not sure, maybe I have to go by ship. But it's a very interesting mix because on the weekends you get people flying over back then, from South Korea, from Hong Kong, going there for shopping and all that. It's a very relaxed environment and it's famous for its ramen, famous for the food and everything. So if you're a foodie, I would highly recommend. The governor there is a young, he's full of enthusiasm for startups. So I would say in terms of regulation, in terms of the desire to set up, aside from Tokyo, which is a lot of noise, it's a very busy environment. Hakata, Fukuoka is where I would say is probably easier entry point if one were to enter the Japanese market. Now, a lot of people ask me the same questions like the UAE. So you have to speak Japanese, you have to do this and do that. I don't know. Having said that, I did study Japanese for 4 years. I do understand the Japanese culture probably more than, the usual. But it doesn't, I think, necessarily impinge on doing business because what's interesting about Japan is I would say it's more modernized than you can ever imagine. In fact, I sometimes feel Japan is more European than European in the sense that, if we go back in history in the 18th century, you had a period called the Meiji Restoration. I don't know if you were aware of that, but basically there was this desire to learn from the West. So that's what they did. They went out to look at the legal systems, the technology. So even back in the 18th, we're talking 1860s, they really went out there. And I think in an interesting way, it has set the path for Japan to be modern in a way that, it's not comparable to say like Thailand or like other developing, but also Asian countries, even Hong Kong. But at the same time, it's traditional because it's somehow maintained it through its own culture, which is, Shintoism and all that. So if I were a startup and I'm interested in the Japanese market, I would say it's traditional first and foremost. So it's not what you know, it's who you know. The same like the Middle East, it's very much business oriented and you can't expect success overnight. In fact, some people were like, it's so hard to deal with, Japanese businesses. Well, I can say, because I'm part of an Asian organization or legal group called Inter-Pacific Bar Association, and I was also part of the British Japan Law Association and worked as a committee member. I can say that, if the understanding is there and, the business mind is there, whilst it will take time, business will happen. So, it's it's different from, say, the European market. Like, for example, in the UK, I can easily go and meet a client and get business tomorrow. But it's not the same. It's not the same. If you're talking about a trusted advisor, if you're talking about, you want long-term success, so you really need to do the groundwork. Ironically, having been to Japan and then come to UAE, I think it's easier to do business in Japan. Maybe it's all relative because I don't speak Arabic, but I think like all things, you gotta show commitment, you gotta show interest. So when I say commitment, so for the guys I've met previously who've been to UAE once, maybe they came back second time and go, okay, I lose patience, that's it, I'm going to America. That's not showing commitment. That's just showing all you're interested is getting the first round investment and leaving. So what they're interested in is, if you're going to set up a business or you're going to do business with us as a supplier or as a buyer, are you here for the long term? And so at every point you're going to be tested. Now, interestingly, say in Japan, which I think is similar to Singapore, is you love going out, eating food, going out and really showing commitment. Can we be friends as much as we are business partners? That is a big part of it. You can't just say, okay, I'm going to meet you during business hours and then forget the evening, because the evening is where business is done, through the sake, through the drinking, through the izakaya, which is beautiful, right? It's seeing a different side of the culture and experiencing it to the fullest. In the Middle East, obviously, because it's a Muslim country, we don't do drinking as such, but obviously, in terms of Western businesses, there are. But it's the same thing. If you get to the point where they invite you to, their local restaurant or to their house, then you're doing very well, right? And I think these things, they don't teach you at business school. They don't teach you, when you learn. It's more like you go out there into the real world. And for the likes of you and me who are very sociable, it's very hard, because how do you socialize online, right? It's not the same. So what you do, there's a lot of groups I've set up, like WhatsApp group, like what you're doing, regular meetups. It absolutely cannot replace the face-to-face, but this is where, you got to ask yourself, well, how am I keeping in touch with them? So what I do is sometimes I since COVID-19, I've sent out, emails to people, or, just checked up with them, say, hey, how you doing? How's your family? And this does take time. It does take an effort, but it's also recognized. So when I mentioned this last time as well, when I sign off and I say, I really look forward to seeing you next time, I really genuinely mean it. So then, it's all these little things that I think all count at the end of the day, because I think this idea of unseen is unheard, or unheard is unseen. And I think the effort makes all the difference, the extra mile, I would say. So yeah, so I actually love Japan. It's one of my favorite places. And Tokyo, oh my god, the food. That's what I miss the most, being in the Middle East, Japanese food.
Yeah, I've been to Tokyo for the event Tokyo Game Show, I think. The famous one. So yeah, I love the food. I mean, obviously Singapore, you can't.
Yes, it's also very good.
Yeah, best place to be if you are a foodie.
Yeah,
best place to be is Singapore. Yes, the big conferences get, you have all the big conferences happening all around the year in Singapore. And this is the best place I've seen so far, because I used to travel Southeast Asia, Dubai. As you rightly said, Dubai, they don't drink after, the conferences get over. But in Singapore, it's quite open, very, very open culture. And the real business gets happen at the networking events that we had, that we used to have last year. So what I've seen difference between I've traveled to Japan just once for a conference related to blockchain.
Yes.
If you see countries like Dubai, Singapore, Southeast Asia, or South Korea as well. I mean, they're quite pro when it came to the having conferences, especially the bigger ones in blockchain. You name it, they used to host these bigger conferences. But Tokyo, Japan, not so much. So what do you think? Is it because they're culturally a little slow? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you're the best person to answer the question. What was the reason? Why would that be?
Yeah, so this is a really cultural nuance. So let's say if I do a comparison with America, right? It's like who speaks the loudest, who dominates the show, gets the more presence. Whilst in Japan, you could say it's a bit more subtle. In fact, the opposite is probably encouraged, right? So humility, so when you have big conferences, even when they get top CEOs speaking, you will see how modest they are compared to the American counterparts. And this is I'm just saying it not to show like how arrogant Americans are, but it's just to see there's quite a nuanced scenario where, for example, if let's say you have a panel, you have like an American speaker and you have Japanese speakers, the Japanese speakers, no matter the seniority, in fact, the more senior, the more quiet they are. That's just how it is, by the way, in the way, the style they do business. So what's interesting is I've done business where, let's say you have a meeting. The most senior person in the room will not speak. It's the most junior person that speaks. The most senior person would either nod their head in agreement or probably give you a funny look, which probably means like, no, I don't agree. But the Japanese are very subtle in how they, when you talk about doing business, how they present themselves. So where you, particularly if it's foreigners flying into Japan, they will want to give them airtime out of respect and courtesy, which is interesting, isn't it? It's not the same way in America. It's like, okay, we've got 15 minutes. We're going to split it. Everyone has 10 minutes. What you're going to find is probably going to give the American guy or woman who flew all the way to come to Japan probably like a good 20 minutes, whilst everyone has 5 minutes because it's out of courtesy. They want to show respect. And that is the same in terms of, you know, particularly if you're a foreigner. So for me, it's an interesting experience for me because I blend in for a start, but then the moment I open my mouth, they see I'm a gaijin, you know, an Australian accented or, you know, British accented lady. But there's a lot of respect. In fact, I didn't find, I mean, I'll give you a really good example. Yes, I was meeting one of potentially the biggest trading houses in Japan, and they were so nice to me. They're like, Helen, you can come here and have coffee anytime. It took me a few meetings to realize business is not going to happen. And it's because purely they never said, we're not going to be able to invest because we're too big. Okay, that's a different scenario. It's not because they're too small, it's because they're too big, right? In whatever startups, you know, we were talking about. So rather than saying, you know, so sorry, you know, the kind of business that you're doing is not what we're looking for. They didn't say that. They actually said the opposite, which was, we'll welcome you to come whenever you wish. And so it took me, so it's rather than them telling you we're not going to do business, it's you figuring it out on your own. So then I was very polite about it and I said, thank you very much for your time, because actually it is true. I'm thanking them for their time. But at the same time, you see how they will never say no. So you got to figure it out because all they're giving you is the politeness. See, so so that's why this is where it can also get tricky. So you get it's like opposite of two ends. You either get rejections all the time, which is what Americans revere. You only succeed if you get rejected, you know, a billion times. But in Japan, it's the opposite because you can't tell. So you've got to suss it out yourself. So what I would say is if people are determined, be it the Middle East or Japanese market, they just need to stick at it. Really. But obviously, if the tech doesn't work, then they have to change, right? And there will be a way where, you know, you don't know whether you're offending people or you're appeasing people or whatnot until you've kind of slowly maneuvered. But what I think probably in both cultures they do appreciate is when you make an effort. So for example, let's say you've got a really crappy product, but they can see you're making an effort, be it the presentation, be it you're providing information. At some point they're going to listen and they go, wait a second, this person is trying. And I think ironically, it's not famously, you know, you come in with an amazing product and you're going to sell right away, but rather they say, wait a second, this person who's trying to do this is actually really making an effort. And I think we need to recognize that. And then that's where the door slowly happens. And I'll give you an interesting example. So a few years ago, I was in Japan and I was visiting two major cities, so Osaka and Tokyo. And when I was in Tokyo, I went to visit a number of clients and my schedule was in the following week, I'll be in Osaka, right? So I went to Osaka and lo and behold, I get a phone call from Tokyo saying, you know, we have a particular case for you. Can you come back to Tokyo? And because I already had a schedule, you see, so I had a schedule in Tokyo, I had a schedule and I already saw them in Tokyo, right? So to go back and, you know, cancel on my Osakan, you know, appointments is not so good. So I apologized. And then, you know, I said I couldn't make it. Now, what happened was they wanted to instruct me for this piece of work, right? Now, in the end, they found another lawyer to do the work. But I'll give you an example. Had I cancelled my appointments in Osaka to just attend their meeting without knowing whether I'll get the meeting, it may increase my chances. You see the difference, right? Because it shows commitment. It shows commitment that for whatever reason, I'm prioritizing them. I'm canceling my appointments to come and meet them. So they would feel more obliged to give me that piece of work. So it's not, so it's an unspoken rule. It's almost like you got to almost like play your cards in a way so that, you know, they can see you're showing commitment. Or at least trying, you know, because if you go off the bat, I'm too busy, I'd rather go to the beach, then clearly you're not going to get that piece of work. So it's a very sort of subtle dance, and even the way you reject people, because it's not rejection, but they will see it as rejection, has to be very soft, right? So, you know, so this is very similar. Actually, the cultures are very similar. The saving phase, oh my gosh, you will understand. You're from Singapore.
Yeah.
The savings phase is absolutely, particularly the more senior they are, the more you have to read between the lines and give them all the benefit of the doubt, you know, when it comes to it, that, you know, and that's something I've learned so much actually from my, you know, interaction in Japan, and I'm still learning here, by the way. I'm still learning the rules, the unspoken rules here. Yeah.
Great. Because of the lockdown, probably, you know, we are all in our own the countries that we are supposed to be, maybe. I don't know. I mean, so yeah, we just, for you, Dubai is home now, and you slowly evolving
so one of the things, whether, you know, I don't know whether I should say this or not, but I'll share it. I'm looking with the view of potential startups and investors, is you always give the more senior people the benefit of the doubt. So let's say you're in a meeting, there are senior people, let's say it was your idea. Okay,
right.
It was your idea, but they'll say blah blah blah, and it's exactly what you just said. You give them the benefit of the doubt and say, it's a great idea. You don't put the other way, which is, hey, wait a second, I just said that a second ago. That will not go down very well. That will not go down well. In fact, you need to have the confidence in knowing they heard your idea, they then think it's their idea, and then you say, wonderful, what a wonderful idea. And then obviously you put the credit not to yourself, which is a very European, Western centric, and you say, that was a team effort, wonderful. And I tell you why I'm saying this, right? Because at least in my firm, majority of people are Arabic speakers. And so when we go in there for client meetings and deals, half the time it's in Arabic. So I don't know, honestly, what goes on, but I have faith in my colleagues. And when they close the deal, I'm like, wonderful, great, deal done, right? Like, well, that's all I need to know, right? So that's exactly it. I think it's having that level of trust. It's understanding that if the senior agrees or repeats what you say, that actually they're echoing what you've worked on, you know, be it an idea, a suggestion, a proposal, then it has to be a good thing, right? So rather than thinking, oh my God, nitpicky, that was my idea, suggestion, you give them the credit, and that will open doors for you in terms of your career. So it's a very different approach to, say, my experience in London or Australia or even America, right? So it's a you know, you give first and then you take second. I think that's probably a good way to look at it, because you will find that in the UAE culture, and particularly in Japanese culture, they're very generous with their time, you know, the whole gift giving culture, you know, so it's interesting. And it's interesting particularly how this will all be played out online, right? Particularly when you can't meet people, you know, face to face.
Absolutely. Good to know about the different perspectives in different countries, Dubai, UAE, and Japan. But Singapore, I think it's quite Western, I would say, because primarily because you know, we have so many people, so many nationalities from different countries living here, US, Australia, Europeans. So it's quite you know, the laws and regulations and the way we do business. I think very
Yeah, I think one thing I should also mention is because, you know, because in the UAE, the majority population is actually of Indian descent, or Indians and Pakistanis. And I guess in Singapore, there's also you know, a healthy, sizable population that's also from India. And then we talk about technology, okay, where of course India is like the country with, you know, the latest technologies. So I'm also very curious to see what, you know, new ideas will come out from India, you know, new inventions and whatnot, because the investors here and also the startups here, I think, you know, or second, third generation. So they've been here for a long time. Yeah.
Well, yes, we have all race and nationalities. I mean, you can name it. I mean, everybody prefers Singapore in Asia to be able to work. The safety net that we have here, smooth policies and regulations that we have here. So so okay, let's move from this aspect to you just touched upon STO while we just started the call. You said that you just closed a offering, like STO offering or something recently, and it's very new when it comes to you know, STOs and everything else. What about you know, ICOs or IOs? how much are you involved in that space in terms of
Yeah. So I think, so for example, at our firm at Hamdan Al Shamsi, we do advise on startups, and I've got some colleagues who are in the corporate team who deal more regularly with them. So for me, it's more an advisory on the business side and at the idea side in DIFC. So what I would say is, for example, specifically say DIFC in relation to Dubai and ADGM, which is in Abu Dhabi, is that you have the regulators, and the regulators are the ones that would approve, let's say if you were a startup and you wanted to set up an office, let's say in DIFC or ADGM, and you have this financial product, which they obviously are regulating, you know? And because, as I mentioned before, only about 2 weeks ago, the DIFC actually approved one of the, first and largest securities token. It's actually a Japanese headquartered company in relation to properties.
Wow.
So it's all very new. So I wouldn't say yes or no definitively from the outset. What I would say is if you're a startup, you're a business, and you're interested in, say, entering the Middle Eastern market, you can come to a law firm or, a business advisory service, just to see, okay, well, what do we need to do to get a sort of approval or get a foot in the door to actually talk to the authorities and say, will it be something of interest to them? So rather than assuming, I can do this in America or Singapore or Hong Kong in the same way, it's actually, I would say, on a case-by-case basis, particularly if you have something innovative, something different. As I said before, a lot of the asset management investment houses in DIFC, they're traditional. They're not actually, I can count my fingers, 1 or 2 that are actually looking into blockchain. So that's why I would say that because it's so new, you want to get the regulators on your side sooner than later. So I'll give you an example. There is one business that had contacted us because they need to fill a questionnaire, but they don't know how to answer it. Now, on the one hand, you could say, yeah, you could do it yourself. But the chances of being rejected or being further questioned is quite worrying, because you're like, look, I just want to do my thing. I don't really need all this bureaucracy. Whilst for us, we speak English and Arabic, which will make your life a lot easier. I don't speak Arabic, but my colleagues do, right? So for them to be able to speak their language, to explain things, to sort of get the ball rolling, particularly if you're you don't know the jurisdiction very well, it helps a lot. I'll give you an example. There is a firm from a Portuguese company, and they have been looking at the Middle Eastern market for a number of years, let's say 3 to 4 years. They still haven't set up. So I said, look, you guys need to just set something up. If you need help, we're here to help, because you need to test the market here in person. You can't just, you can, if your business model is you just want to fly in and fly out, like the way you talk about conferences, that's fine. But if you really want to dig deep into the market, if you really want to talk to investors who are interested in potentially investing in you long term, you want a presence here in the Middle East. You know what I mean? It's like you want to do business in Singapore. There's only so much flying in and flying out, particularly with COVID-19, right? So you need to set up properly in Singapore to then be able to say, look, what can I do to set up in the kind of business that I want, and particularly when it's new, when about securities token. How can I talk to regulators? And it is very, very common, even for us to go and visit the regulator. So in a sense that if you're going to fly in and fly out, it's not convenient. So why not set up here, plan it so that be it you recruit locally or overseas, to have someone on the ground, to talk to people on the ground, so then you can grow roots, you can then develop the business. And so therefore, actually, to be honest, it's no different like any traditional business. I think the difference is the strategy might be slightly different in terms of how you start out, because right now we can't go anywhere. So then you might say, okay, let me correspond. But at some point, like I say, people are going to say, well, I want to see you. I want to see whether you're real. So I want to see the 3D of you as a CEO, CFO, whatever. And then go from there. So I think from the standpoint of doing business, it's no different like any jurisdiction. So you could be Africa, right? Like any jurisdiction in Ghana, in Zimbabwe, wherever, even in India, right? You want to come to Kerala, you want to go to New Delhi, it's no different. But I think in terms of how you want to have buy-in, I would say in the past in the UAE, where it was only limited to 50-50 local ownership. Now you can be a foreign-owned company in your own right, 100%. So that is a big incentive to say, hey guys, if we're interested in the Middle East, we don't need to worry about that side of it. But what we do need is good advice. And so once you get the good advice, you got people advising. So one way we've been helping clients, to give an example, is to get them to sign what we call power of attorney. So in other words, you can give me, you're in Singapore, you give me a power of attorney. I can act on your behalf as if you were here, like that, with a document. Yeah. So any official documentation set up, we team up with another organization to do this. So you could be, I can be helping you. You're based in Singapore. I'm here right now. You tell me exactly what you need. I can help you do it. So we are cutting down borders, as it were, but having someone on the ground makes a world of a difference, right? And so I'm trying to help these guys who've been flying back and forth for the last 3-5 years, not getting anywhere, to say, look, guys, you want some proper help? We can give you some proper help. You can give us a POA. You can still do your business. You want to set up meetings? We set up together. We'll attend the meetings with you, knowing that we're on the ground. And I think it gives not just you the comfort, it gives the client the comfort that there's someone they can just knock on the door and say, hey, can we meet for lunch or coffee and just talk?
Yeah.
I mean, it's simple, right? I mean, I'm saying it like it's so simple. Back pre-COVID-19, this is a piece of cake. Post-COVID-19, it's a huge logistic endeavor, right? But I'm just giving you an example. And slowly, like, I'm also trying to organize meetings with people and all that. And, it's happening. But I think we'll need to give it another good 6 months to see how things will pan out, But that's my thoughts. Anyway, I'd love to hear, how do you think business will be different in Singapore? Is it still face-to-face or online?
No, it's not only about Singapore, I would say. I think in every country it's the same situation. Like we all are facing the same situation because of social distancing and physical distancing. So I think digital appetite has picked up everywhere. A lot of digital payments, everywhere. Like Singapore, Southeast Asia, or India. Talk about any country. I mean, the digital appetite has gone up because we are forced to now, because we are sitting at home. E-commerce online has picked up. Amazon reported that their profits, they've just humongously gone up because everybody's shopping online. So it applies to everywhere, every country that we live in. How this is going to change in the next 6 months, I don't think anything is going to change in the next 6 months. That's what I predict. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to be wrong, but I predict it's going to be this year, 2020. We just have to have a reset. We just have to reset ourselves, as you rightly said. Think through, start planting the seeds right now. Re-strategize yourself. I mean, this is the time to just, as you rightly said, take a step back and re-strategize your business strategies for next year. Who knows, with the vaccination, and things goes back to the old normal, the normal that we had to live in. So this is a time we should just take our break, not break in some sense like literally going on vacation. We can't anyway, but rethink, re-strategize yourself. On the closing notes, because we just have 3 more minutes to go. So I mean, Helen, it's very nice to have the relationship with you and talking to you again, opening up the cultural nuances of every country is a very good thing to know. I think we can bridge that gap between UAE and Southeast Asia or Singapore, because of the region we're talking about. So you are there to help the startups from this side of the world.
Sure, absolutely,
Bridge that gap between the two countries. So that's
and just on that point, I want to share with you. So next Wednesday and Thursday, we are actually getting Group Investments, who I told you were the first security tokens, doing a webinar with us. And then on the Thursday, actually Fintech Hive. So I'd love to invite you and your members to join us. I need to double check whether it's going to be live or whether we're going to send the video out. But I'll definitely share the link with you because that's definitely up your street. It's all about fintech. So then you will hear it from the horse's mouth about fintech in the UAE.
Okay, great. Thank you, Helen. I mean, thanks for your time today. We've spoken a lot and we become more and more close, that we opened up into a lot of things, right? So thanks to have you again. And I think thanks for your time today. Thanks for your patience, giving us 1 hour airtime. So it comes. So we are now at the end of the session. I would like to say, people, thanks for watching us. Even though it was just one speaker today. Unfortunately, other speakers couldn't attend because of the timing constraints and other commitments they had. You can watch our shows Monday to Friday at www.latoken.com/events. It's all there on our website. So pick up a subject of your interest. Like today's topic was fintech and blockchain in Asia. So pick up a topic of interest and let me know, or let my team know what is of interest to you, and we can always invite you to speak at our VCTV. So it's a good way to stay connected, stay engaged, and I love talking to people and sharing knowledge with everyone. Thank you, Helen, again,
Okay, thank
and
you.
hopefully talk to you soon.
Yes, same here, same here. You take care.